how does growth play in? Because we haven't done anything with growth here. It's simply the basic idea is you want to establish a competitive advantage and make sure that competitive advantage lasts as long as it possibly can. Second thing is, how does value relate to growth? So let's look at this example, and let's put it this way. The basic line here, growth matters if you have a competitive advantage. In other words, you're able to earn more than the required rate of return. Okay, let's look at this. Growth matters if the required rate of return on the investment, the return on the investment is greater than the required rate of return. Growth is the ability to invest more and earn a growth adds value when you're able to invest more and earn a return on investment greater than the required rate of return. Now suppose, let's take this example. If a firm grows at 5% per year, for me what this means is that they can invest 5% more each year and earn 12% on the investment. Since the required rate of return on investment, return on investment is greater than the required rate of return. Every time they do this, it creates value, creates a positive NPV value. Okay, so let's sort of look at what this means. So what I did is I started with, let's assume the WACC is 10%, the return on investment is 12%, and the investment is 100. Now we know that if you didn't have any growth, the present value of the free cash flows would be 120. That's exactly what we had before. Okay, if we had 120, we did it forever. Now, so what do? First year at time zero, I invest 100. Okay, that's an incremental investment of 100, and the value of that 100 at earning 12% a year forever is 120. All right. Now, next step is next year I invest an additional 5, and I also am able to earn. Okay, I'm actually able to earn 12% on that investment. So I go back over here for that investment of 5, which is so for that investment of $5, which is, this is the $5 times 12%. What I earn is I earn 0.6. Okay, every year. That's the cash flow associated with it. I discount that at 10%, so it's 0.6 forever. So that winds up being a total of 6. Then I take out my investment, which is 5% of the 100, which is 5. So that winds up being a net present value here of 1. Okay, so that first time that I make that additional investment of $5, what I'm able to do is create a positive NPV project of 1. Okay? Now when I go to the next year, I invest 5% more. In other words, I have a growth here, 5%, so not 5, but 5.25. And if I go through this whole process up here, what I wind up with is 1.05. In other words, it's growing. Okay, the value, the NPV grows. NPV of every time I do this, the NPV grows at 5%. And so if I figure out what the value is, and so if I assume that I'm able to grow at 5% per year, and every time I make an investment, I earn 12% on it, the present value of all those future cash flows is just 140. So I could have done that directly by just sort of saying, okay, the value is 120, which is the original 100, and then and this is sort of the next NPV, which is 1, divided by the required rate of return, WACC, minus the growth rate. This is worth 20. Okay, so this part here is 20, so that's what I'm doing here, is I'm estimating the value of that. So I wind up with a value of 140. And so the idea here is that the assets I have today, the $100, gives me a value of 120, and if I'm able to reinvest at a rate of return greater than the required rate of return, I create value, because what I'm doing is every time I make that additional investment, I have a positive NPV project where I'm creating value. Now, the question comes down then is, what happens if I just am able to earn my required rate of return? Well, in this particular case, growth doesn't add any value, because every new investment, if what I do is I'm only able to earn 10% on my investment, every new project that I create is a zero NPV project, and therefore, even if I'm growing, adding zero NPV projects does not create value for me today. Okay, so that if they invest 5% more each year, if they earn 10% instead of 12% on the investment, since the return on investment is equal to the required rate of return, each new investment has a zero NPV, and growth does not create value today because there's no competitive advantage. Even if I grow, I'm not creating value today because I'm not accruing any positive NPV projects in the future. All right, so the key thing here is there's the three elements now. What's great is if you can create a competitive advantage where you're earning on your investment more than your required rate of return, that creates value. The longer you're able to do that creates value. And the ability to invest more money and earn the higher rate, return on investment greater than the required rate of return creates value. So the key here is, though, that in each one of these cases, you're really only creating value if you have a competitive advantage where the return on investment is greater than the required rate of return. Now let's look at the case where when we have a return on investment, a situation where the return on investment is greater than the required rate of return, really what it does is the higher the growth, the more value created, which in this particular case, if we look here, I did exactly what I did before, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to vary the growth rate. And what I get is that as the growth rate goes up, this is again where my return on investment is equal to 12% and required rate of return is equal to 10%. What we'll get to see is that the value of the firm goes up the higher my growth rate. So the higher the growth rate, the higher the value of the firm. Because what this says is I'm able to reinvest additional monies and earn that required rate of return. So I'm actually able to take my competitive advantage and expand it. Okay, this is new markets, growing my product, whatever, but it's a pretty strong assumption. So I go back here, and then the question becomes, as I said before, that if the required rate of return is equal to, return on investment is equal to the required rate of return, what we have is a situation where with growth, if the return on investment is equal to the required rate of return, growth does not change the value, okay? Because every new project is a zero NPV project, and so adding them doesn't increase the value,